So in this exercise, we're going to use the pen tool for selection. We're going to select, for example, the mouth with the pen tool, because you will see that it gives you a lot more control than using the regular tools, because we can define precisely the curvature. So I'm going to zoom over. And I'm going to start here. Click and drag a little bit, and then drag. You see, I'm using the path tool and not the actual fill or layer tool. So here I just want a little curvature, so I'll have a small drag and then drag and then alright, so I made a mistake here, so I'm gonna press delete and click on the previous point to continue what you already have. So whenever you need a small curvature, you're gonna have a small drag. Whenever you need a big curvature, you're gonna have a big drag, like I'm doing right now. And then I'll just go like this. So now, if I go to my path selection tool, the whole thing is one path. So I'm gonna go to my direct selection tool now, which is the white arrow, and zoom over and make sure that I have the proper selection or the proper form. So I'll go over them point by point, clicking on them. So I see that this one is too low, so I'll move it up, adjust. Okay, this has to actually go down a bit, so I'll go like this, adjust the curve. Once you get the hang of it, you'll see that this is a very efficient method of selection. But you have to repeat it a few times to make sure that you know how to operate it. So selecting the point will let you move it. Clicking on the point will let you change the curvature. That's very important to remember. Alright. So maybe I went too far here. It has to be like this. But the nice thing is that it's always editable. You can always edit what you're doing. You never lose your work, because it's a line that you're modifying. So now that I have something that looks like a good selection, I'm gonna select it, right click and choose make selection. And I'll press OK. So if I press Ctrl C and Ctrl V, I will see that I just have the mouth on its own layer. So let's call this mouth, for example. I can change the blending mode. Now I want to feather out the edges. Alright, let's say that I like this, but I think that the edges are too sharp. I want to feather out just the edges. If I blur, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, the whole thing will be blurred. The whole layer will be blurred. Now in this case, it doesn't look bad because I'm using a blending mode, but let's say that I just wanted to blur out the edges. What can I do then? First, I have to select, let's hide the head layer. I need to select the contents of the layer. So I'll press Ctrl and click. This will select the contents of the layer. So it will create a selection around what is there. Now, I need to contract the selection. So I'll choose Select, Modify, and Contract. Let's say by 8 pixels. So it's 8 pixels smaller, but now I'll invert the selection so that the outer part will be selected. So I'll choose Select and Inverse. So now the outer part is selected. Let's do something. I will see that it's just the outer part that's selected. Undo. And now I'll feather the selection so that I don't have any sharp edges again. So select and feather, let's say by 5 pixels. And now I'll choose Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And we'll see that it's just the outer edge that's being blurred without messing up with the inner part, which is extremely important, because then you still get the detail, but the outer part is feathered out. So Control D and show the other one, and there you go. Change the hue with hue saturation to get a different color. You can change the lightness to intensify that color. Increase the saturation to make it more concentrated in terms of color. Alright, so there you go. Now another thing I can do is duplicate this layer. So I'll have double the effect if I duplicate it, and I can change the blending mode on the new one to see if it gives me a better result. And you can always change the opacity or the fill on the new one. So that, I think, is a good effect. So again, we saw how to use the pen tool to create selections and use those selections for changing the colors in different parts of the image.